Uh-oh. I see everybody. Come on in. Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Wait for the other people to come in. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here at the last round of the Drawn Out Conference, April 2022 extravaganza. I think this is officially final Zoom artist talk of the century. We're just going to get here this final Zoom. I'm really excited that all joining us. Has been quite a venture. The John started in April, and now maybe not going. Just for those that don't know, several career artists in schools around Ohio, Pennsylvania, I'm going to have a blank. I'm looking ahead, Justin. I don't know what some sort of that together to talk about drawing and art practices, sort of re-energize what we do. And these artists, disciplines, photography, painting, and so on and so forth. Each of the artists, there's the artist drawing to this conference and has been going towards to this exhibition and accompanying the exhibition and places is artist talk. So we have the last. Save the best for last. We have the last here with our very own Denison University professor Justin Coleman. And let me give a little background on Justin. Justin, assistant professor, studio art program, Denison University, working with sculpture and ceramics. Graduated from RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, and the University of Delaware. He is an arts educator. He's has been also a professional studio assistant. He is a practicing working artist. His work has been shown in many galleries and exhibitions, including the Occupy Museum's Debtfair show, the 2017 Whitney Biennial. He has participated with Brickscape Residency, has been a recipient, an artist grant, individual artist grant from the Pittsburgh Foundation, has shown at other places like Youngstown State University, Wabash College. And I'm excited to hear about Justin's use of drawing in his art practice, which tends to deal with sort of the cultural relationships to objects and the sort of redefinition of craft. Justin, I'm handing it over to you. Thank you for contributing and being generous with your time and your participation. And I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Keith. Thank you for doing this and putting it all together. So let me get ready to share my screen, and then we'll get started without much delay. All right, we good, Keith? Can we see that? Is there a big white screen up there? Perfect.
You're good.
So, well, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for coming to the last episode of the Drawn Out Conference. It's been kind of long and drawn out, but however, we're here at the finish line. So before I get started, I just want to say a special big thanks to Keith Allen for putting this together. Another big thank you to all of my other colleagues across the region for submitting work and contributing insightful, intellectual, and funny content for this. And lastly, a super big shout out to all the FedEx and UPS workers for the legwork of moving the art around from university to university. I feel like that needs to be said. So this is my title screen for the Drawn Out Conference, and there's a couple ideas I have about drawing that I use in my practice, and I'm going to talk through them, and some of those ideas will be kind of interwoven, but we'll mix back and forth, really sort of merge together. But first, I want to talk about drawing isn't always at the core of the artwork that I produce. it's a big part of its process and its method. But when I was a kid, I was always afraid that I wasn't able to draw because I couldn't draw Bart Simpson very well. I couldn't draw like the TV cartoons, and there was like always someone better in the room. So it just like when I was a young kid, I just was like, I can't be an artist. I like art, but I just can't be an artist. And it was only when I got older that I realized that that wasn't exactly true. So thinking ahead about this presentation, I asked a couple students to draw portraits of me, and I only gave them 3 minutes. So the first two, this one and the next one, are from students. This one is from Tima Bay, and this one is from Deb Garner, and they're definitely contrasting portraits. And the last one is really from me. And I feel like unlike the prior two, you can really feel the age in this one, which I feel like is accurate. You know, I feel like it's in there somehow. You don't see wrinkles, but you can almost see it in the eyes. So I thought it'd be nice to introduce myself with pictures of drawings of myself. So that'd be good. So I don't know if you guys can you see this little animation I have going, or little video. So what I want to talk about today is not what is drawing, or not what I think drawing is per se, but I kind of want to talk about how it operates in my practice. So that would be the theoretical understanding of drawing for myself as an artist. And it's really 3 different things. It's communication. Drawing has the ability to communicate to someone who's observing and reading it as visual information. For the person who's doing it, it's a method of learning, visualizing, and remembering. And in the process, it's also a mental state type of focus. Can be something meditative, but that's you have to believe to make a drawing. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. I also just need to put it out there that as it says over on the right of the screen, these are not answers. This is no gospel, y'all. This is the op-ed section. These are speculative propositions at best. So first, I want to take you into what my sketchbooks usually look like. Usually, it's very similar to the work that I submitted for the Drawn Out conference, of just geometric forms, sort of like 3D objects in space. A lot of times you'll see me doing line drawings, cubes, octahedrons, changing them in perspective, and occasionally practicing some graffiti letters. So I feel like these are the kinds of drawings I do to start to think through, or allow my mind to work in a way where I'm not so concerned with the end result. I'm just more concerned with the doing. So this is, like I said, generally what happens inside of my sketchbook. Now, I'm going to get to talking about where drawing really supports me in terms of the objects I make in a second. So let's look at a little bit of the work I make. So some of the works that I produce are these full-size ceramic rims, right? They're like dubs on a fancy cars, but they're all done on the potter's wheel and all hand built together. And here's another version of the rim. So these are all things that I make in clay and I make as a sculptor of sorts, but they all start by thinking through them in terms of geometry. So these are the drawings that usually, like when I start doing drawings like this, these are the ones that I am relying on as I develop my thinking to produce the work, right? Sort of building in the knowledge for creating the piece in 3 dimensions. And some of these are like, you know, pretty technical drawings. Like the last ones were about angles. You can see I'm using a compass, right? And everything is very measured, but they're not really crisp, clean, representational. They're just about information. And again, it's just, this for me is just about trying to work out kind of an idea or get a better understanding of what it would be like when it's realized. So this is, you know, on the same lines. When I do a lot of this, I do this in a bit more traditional kind of fashion. I try to operate with a compass and a straight edge and sort of use sort of like, how should I put this, like antique geometry to create these kinds of forms. Maybe I just like doing things the hard way, I'm not sure. But to try to connect this, right, I want to show you the process shots of building one of these rims so that you have a little bit of a better understanding of why becoming so familiar with the geometry is important, right? Because as I do this, as I think through it in 2D, when I finally get to 3D, I can see it, understand it better. And if anything, let me say maybe it flows a bit more from my fingertips. Of a lot of these planning drawings, I think this is a really, really nice one. Like I enjoy looking at it, right? But for me and how I code things, or at least how I think about what my art production is, I don't classify this there. I enjoy it as a drawing. I just don't classify it in the same way of other things I produce. So this little drawing, and if you look at the note in the upper right, as I was going back through my sketchbook, I was thinking to myself, this little drawing ended up becoming maybe the most successful ceramic rim that I've made, right? And moving to look at it, you can start to see how, I mean, it's really, really almost exacting to the drawing. Okay, so that's one of the ways that I use drawing. And as I explain it in this next section, it's very similar, but just a little different. It's still thinking through something. It's still trying to create the visual information for me to understand, for possibly another person to understand it. But the more I do that, right, the closer it gets to becoming a concrete, realized thing. So this is a still from a performance I did. And in this performance, I built this sofa thing all in like one shot. So it was like an 8-hour like take almost. And so I started with a pile of lumber, the tools, and I put the whole thing together over time. And this is me finally getting a chance to sit in it. So I want to show you some of the drawings that I was doing leading up to this and sort of thinking through it. And these are some of the initial brainstorms about what this kind of seat, or what can I start to make. And I think see how this connects to that kind of geometric sketching drawing I showed you earlier in some of those sketchbook pages. Here at the bottom left, you see a very, very rough sketch, right? But that was probably the first time the pen hit the page for me to start thinking. And then above it, you see a much more clear version with measurements, with me starting to, again, take the rough sketch and then actually bring it to scale and then understand it in proportions. And some of these sketches are just trying to do little details, particularly like where a piece of joinery or some sort of connection would be, or understanding what something would look like in a visual profile. So we're getting close to these are the end of the sofa designing process in paper. And you can see how the drawings have become slowly more and more sophisticated as they go. So these are some of the ways I use drawings, but the last two also were so much based on math and numbers and thinking about things technically. I want to show you just a little bit of a contrast where it's less about math and numbers and it's more about just getting the idea out. So this is a picture of some of the newer work that I've been making, thinking about city spaces, economic forces, changes, gentrification, and sort of paralleling the vessel with the architecture in the city. And for these are the drawings I was doing for those, and they're a lot less technical, but it's more about just getting the idea out, like one way or the other. So some of this has to do with text, but others is just like, what if, or that thing that I think I see in my head, can I start to see it if I put it on paper? Right? These are more of the same. So in this particular page of my sketchbook, and this is like my current, like the sketchbook I'm still using, on the bottom left, there's a tiny drawing of a pot, right? And that one really was the seed that grew into making this piece. where I was wondering if I could put a piece of sewer pipe directly into the pot and have it fill in a hole in the wall. If you look to the upper right, you'll see a piece up there sitting on a triangular form where it says tieback, okay? And then that one was the first time I had thought about what would happen if I could put the vessel form on a diagonal onto another ceramic plane, another piece of sewer pipe. Right. And so those are another ways where me thinking about that, like I would like to think I was completely conscious of saying, I want to make this just like the drawing. I think I was probably semi-conscious. I think those were some of the drawings I liked as ideas. And then when I got into the studio, there was a moment when I was able to take that leap. Right. So one of the big things I think with drawing is that it's communication, right? And that's when a person is reading the visual information left over from a drawing. And I mean that in its most base mode. So I think in this, my little video here, I feel like I covered a lot, right? There's not too much in the way of sophisticated mark making and drawing. However, there's a bunch of information there. So, and I know this is a crude, quick drawing, but just hear me out on this, right? In this one little drawing, I covered architecture, I covered cartography, including geological features like a river and a mountain range, and I also covered drawing mammals, which is a big thing for drawing and representation. So again, I think it's not a sophisticated drawing, but there's information that's there when I think of it that way. So these next series of images are going to be what I would call questionably good drawings with monumental outcomes. So here's a drawing from Isaac Newton that was him trying to create the visual of thinking through light by running it through a prism. And again, I love this drawing. I love that, like, they even bothered to try to put it into perspective in the room, but also like how the light rays are curved. I feel like there's a lot of rich things in this drawing. But at the end of the day, all the information is there. Here's one that was this supposedly from Charles Darwin, thinking about the evolutionary tree. And again, it's just a simple form of mapping, right? So there was an idea that was in their head and they put it out in this map kind of form. Also, let's please take a moment to notice on the top left, it starts with I think. This is Alexander Graham Bell on the telephone, some of the early telephone sketches. And I love this drawing a lot, maybe because again, there's something about it that relates to the way that I draw, but there's such great information. Like I said, drawings of questionable quality with monumental outcomes. And to try to put all of those into a type of code that we understand, I think a little bit more, right? Here is the Ikea furniture, right? And so these are very, very sophisticated drawings, meant to be very clearly read beyond modes of language. Right? Just understanding form and where things go. Okay. And so this would be, of all the types of drawings that I feel like we just looked at, this would be like the real sophisticated end. But it has all the right information. This is the form that we're most comfortable with those kinds of drawings. Who else do we got here? Frank Gehry is maybe, I don't know. I think I found when I first saw some of Frank Gehry's sketches for their architecture when I was an undergrad, I found it really liberating. I was like, you mean you could make these monumental things that start from something like this, you know? And so I got this off of the website. I think it was like I forget what the exact website was, but it seemed to be for Frank Gehry and sort of like archiving information. However, I don't know like if that sketch is the same drawing or not, or like the same building. I'm really not sure. But I don't know if that necessarily matters to me, right? If anything, that sketch is more for what Frank Gehry was seeing. So here's another page from my sketchbook where I was thinking through this idea about frames and frames as becoming their own thing, or a piece of a broken frame maybe being more significant, more standout than a full rectangular frame. And so these were sketches that moved into pieces like these, really from that one thought about the frame and doing a quick series of drawing rectangles with broken ends and lines that cross through them. Great. Now what's next? Okay, so some of what I was talking about already touches upon drawing as a method of learning. And it also definitely touched upon drawing as visualization, right? Trying to capture an idea, make a plan, or organize some thoughts. So these next slides are going to continue along this line, but also maybe talk about it from a bit of a different direction. So I thought this was, sometimes if I have questions, I just to be like, how widespread is this idea? I just do a Google search and see what comes up. So yeah, drawing helps people remember. Anybody else ever do doodles to help remember things in high school on their notes? I did. Okay, so continuing, right? Here's a very, very, I would say like famous book from 1665. It was drawings of insects and tiny organisms from underneath a microscope. And now these were all drawings, right? This one was the most famous of the drawing, where it was a fold out, it was like a centerfold that had an accordion way that it folded out of the book. And it was this giant drawing of a flea, right? And it had all of this detail in it. And I can't help but think that like by the end of this, Hook probably understood so many details of all of these organisms, of all of these insects and tiny things. And that to me is the thing about drawing that I find really interesting, where if you are going to take the time to make a very detailed drawing of a thing, and I mean this even if you aren't making, even if your drawing isn't as crisp and representational as what you're looking at now, if you bother to draw every detail, every piece of that exoskeleton, right? Every little hook on that leg, you have built in your understanding of that thing, right? It has become a method of observational learning for you, and very detailed observational learning. Okay, so I feel like that also applies to other things like botanical drawing, right? Or redoing architectural drawings and those kinds of things, right? Where you become very, very aware of what it is that you're drawing. So I want to talk about this in a bit more, a way that thinks a bit more like about personal meaning too. So an uncle of mine passed a while back, but that's not so much the issue. So don't say, oh, it's more about trying to think about making up for time that I didn't spend with my uncle. And I found myself over this past summer.
Wait, I'm writing that down.
I found myself this past summer, basically drawing pieces of his life. And I thought that was really kind of interesting. I didn't know what to do, but here at his memorial picnic, we had this little presentation, and I realized he had a cane that said Papa in gold. And I found that to be its own wild thing. But I took a photo of it, and I found myself like trying to like use this cane and things. Here I painted it as a watercolor. Here I drew it in my sketchbook, right? He also drove like a particular blue Acura, like the one you're looking at. And I even found myself trying to draw that car, right? And I thought that was pretty unique, or not unique, but like it said something to me, right? as I was thinking about drawing and thinking about this talk, it said something to me about like, oh, these are the ways that I actually use drawing. So it's not just about learning about like planning something. It's not just about learning about something, but it's also a way to like, you can shorten distance. So then I was visiting someone for dinner a while back. And while I was there, I had known before that their husband had passed 5 or 6 years ago. And while I was there, I realized they were doing these very detailed drawings of their husband. And I thought that was another, one, I think these are great drawings in terms of representational drawings. I mean, you could really feel his expression and sort of seriousness. That's like he's reading a tough article in the newspaper. But I really thought it was something where I was like, oh, so this wasn't unique to me at all. This was something that actually like people do this. Like this is probably very widespread. So, and here's another last little, like where we saw these more elaborate drawings that KB did. This is one where, right, you can see these are quick sketches, but they're still, right, the act of doing it is remembering and visualizing and keeping close. So what else did I talk about for a little bit on this list? I talked about remembering, focus, meditation, and belief. All right. So this is maybe where I'm most out on a limb at this point, trying to talk about focus, meditation, and belief. Okay, but so work with me, guys. Maybe you'll get your real entertainment for this right now. All right, so step one. When you first start drawing something, you don't really have very, very much there, okay? But you have to be in good faith that if you keep going, you can get something out of, right? Like these lines and marks that you're making, okay? So I started with a series of lines. They weren't really doing much. And then now I find myself, right, trying to create this perspective of space, right? Like there's a plane here, right, that you could, if you came down to it and were level with it, you could traverse across it, okay? So that's one thing that I think you have to do in all drawings. And maybe if you're really good, you don't have this problem anymore, but you still start with a blank page. So in my mind, there's a leap of faith that happens when you're in the middle of a drawing, right? So here I'm telling you guys, lines became space. I believed it could, right? And so that was my leap of faith right there in that moment, okay? And so I'll keep going with this, and I'm going to try to draw another object in this space. Now, again, guys, I'm not like drawing really isn't my thing. Like this is, I told you from elementary school, I've been a little intimidated by drawing. But there's something there when you believe, like you have to make it through when the drawing isn't anything for it to come to something. Some people have developed a skill. They have good faith in their abilities to draw something, and others it takes a little bit more. But I think that's something very notable about drawing as an act. I also think that is the place. And again, like I said, guys, this is the op-ed section. This isn't gospel. I think that is a place where things actually get things start to become art, is when there's that leap of faith, when you actually have to make it through an unknown with the drawing. So if you know you can draw it all the time, like those kids could draw Bart Simpson, that's not the same, right? You have to be able to make it through the thing, right? There'll be a place where it doesn't look like anything. So this is as fast as I could draw. I'm sorry, I can't draw any faster. So I think you guys can start to see where this is going. Eventually, I put enough marks up on there that we start to see a tree full of leaves planted on the plane that I draw. So again, that's something where it's like, I have to believe that it's going to look like a tree. I have to, right? So getting there, almost there. I'm gonna jump ahead though. So drawing as meditation, right? So when you're drawing, and it's not that it's necessarily meditating in the way that like, you don't sit down and think about it like meditating, you don't have to, but when you're doing it, there's a point of focus where you're still in yourself, but you're like also on the paper, right? You're almost floating in between. Let's run that back. And right? And when you're doing that, you can get lost in the drawing. And if any of you guys have ever been in a place where you've been drawing so much, right, or working on something so much, you kind of snap into it. For a second, you lose track of time, even if that's for 4 minutes, right? You've sort of reached this point of focus, this state. I'm gonna run that back again. So for me, there's something about the act of drawing, even if you're like not drawing something that's representational at all. This is about an hour's worth of me going through with a ballpoint pen and just letting my arm and pen do what it does, and not worried about actually trying to draw anything. Run that back again. So to me, there's something very meditative in that process, right? There's something where I am not like, I'm just letting the thoughts come and go, and I am just in one place. I'm very present, I'm very there, right? But I am not like, there's no end other than just doing this and being in that particular place. So I finished my outline, everyone. Those are the theoretical underpinnings of drawing in my practice. So like I said, this isn't gospel. It's pretty wild. It's out there. But I'm open to questions, and I'm curious if you guys have it, try to answer it the best I can.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, for sure. You all, please don't hesitate to stir up a conversation, ask some questions, comments, and don't be shy.
What happens if you like plan something and then you get to the stage of like creating it fully in sculpture and then you realize that you planned something wrong?
And you know what? That's why I draw it so many times. Yes, I don't just draw it once. I draw it over and over in different perspectives. And the idea is, and this is particularly true if you find yourself doing scale drawings, the idea is if you're doing it well enough, you'll kind of catch it in the scale drawings. Other than that, you really like, this is where having a good skill set in whatever material that you're working in terms of sculpture really is handy, because like I work in clay for the most part, and so I have a good enough understanding in it that I can make some decisions on the fly if I miscalculated something and still bring it to an end. Same with wood and those other kinds of things. So I hope that helps. The more drawing, the more planning, the better, but you still have to know, right? Like if you've never built something in wood before, no matter how much you plan it, you're going to run into a lot the first time you try it. Hi, Michaela.
So thank you for the talk, Justin. It was great. I have the good fortune of sharing the bottom part of Bryant with you.
Yeah.
So I get to see your work constantly coming out in and out of the kilns and see your progress. I have seen so much new ceramics happening there, and there's so much going on the surface, right? You have found images, you have images that you have created, they're just layering. So how do you approach that kind of drawing on your three-dimensional objects?
Good question. That might be, I don't know. And again, maybe this is where collaging and drawing share a similarity. I think a lot about creating compositions and layers in that way. So usually one layer go down and I'll think about it as a composition, and then the next layer go down and sort of react to it. There's not much in the way of really planning those particular images in drawings. A lot of times I will find myself in one of these layers going back to it to add something I just realized I thought it needed. So for instance, on some works, there are times I will add these tiny little grids or sort of a broken piece of grid into it. And some of that is thinking about the composition of the piece, right? And so so on one hand, it's just adding into other kinds of decoration. Second, those little grids, actually, you find them a lot in sort of like very ornamental dinnerware and those kinds of things. They'll be used a lot in the borders in different ways. And I was interested in the grid showing up on those particular pieces as representation of city blocks and city spaces, and trying to kind of break the grid in that way and also leave marks within inside of it. So you've seen the work, so I feel like I speak to it a bit more specifically to those kinds of hand drawings you're talking about. So good question, thank you. Oh, hey, Rye.
Hey, Justin. That was super nice to hear you talk about the process, you know, and see the sort of finished work along with the drawings. You know, one of the things that struck me is, you know, being modest about your drawing skills, but with all those, with all your, and with all the slides, you do really nice lettering. And I know you mentioned graffiti, and just seeing the notebook page, you know, your sketchbook pages that, you know, like intermingle writing and notes to yourself and quotes with actual drawings. I'm just curious, like how you see, you know, the relationship between drawing and writing, or drawing in letter forms, and even, you know, the stylized, you know, titles you were doing for the presentation too, like, you know, have a sense of aesthetics and have a sense of depth and perspective that I see, you know, in your geometric shape. So I just, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in that.
Okay. I guess it's like, I like to think about things first in this really broad kind of way, like what's the biggest common denominator. And so at the end of the day, it just becomes visual language, right? So I remember like the first time, I remember as a kid, the first time I saw like Russian writing, and it was completely like, what is this? What are these characters? Just had so many questions and just wanted to keep looking at it and trying to understand it. And I think I was just really picking up on visual information. It's funny, you know, I spent a lot of time, I grew up in a city, and like I said, I've always been interested in art. So it's easy to sort of find yourself trying to like think about and engage more with graffiti as a thing. So I know that had a big influence on me in thinking about like just drawing and drawing letters and thinking about letters. And the funny thing is though, is that like I found now that like I'm like really interested in like lettering, like old sign painting letters, and thinking about type in that sort of way. And I still, even though I know I'm looking at type, I still think about it in terms of like it as a visual. And so I still think of signs, type, and graffiti in this same sort of way. Right. And so I think when it comes to certain, I never think about how that influences the forms I make, but I do think about how that influences the type of marks I make. So that was a pretty broad question, so I hope I wrangled that down. I think there was another question. Do I feel as though that drawing limits my free flow of my art practice? Does it ever feel restraining? Good question. That's a really good one. I think in the way that I used to think about drawing, not the way I talked about it today, but the way that I felt like it was more intimidating, I felt like then it felt a lot more restraining, because I couldn't draw the thing the way I couldn't draw the thing and get that like what I wanted out of it. And that's when it felt restraining. And I felt like when I started to I don't want to say give up on that, I guess I changed my expectations, and I felt like I got to have a much better relationship with drawing. So I hope that helps Rodika. Hey, Kelsey.
Hi. You and I talk about this all the time. You get mad at me every time I say I'm not good at something.
I was like, look, I'm going to give this whole discussion, and if some students on it, they're going to call me out on this. I almost like preface it to be like, students, you can take me to task about it.
Yeah,
but you're right. Yes.
I was listening. I was hearing you in the back of my mind the entire time. But like, how do you get past that? Because you were saying like when you were younger, you felt like you were a terrible artist, like you couldn't draw. Like, how do you get past that mindset of like being, I suck at this, to being like,
I think a lot of times you just have to get to a breakthrough. And for me, it was finding the right medium that I could hit the ground running. And for me, it was really about like, it was honestly the one day I was like, wait, I learned, I know how to throw a pot now? You're kidding. And then I realized I was like, I can be so creative. like in these other ways. Like it doesn't like, I'm not worried about Bart Simpson anymore. And that was kind of the thing for me. So, and that's kind of what I want. Like, so yeah, I tell all my students, if you say no, you can't do it in the beginning, then you're not going to be able to do it. And I say that to everybody. So thank you for catching me on that. But I do recommend that everyone looks for a thing that they have a real breakthrough moment with, something that they feel like they can really like get some wind under their wings or pick up a good stride running, and then like that will be the kind of breakthrough thing. And for me, it's that confidence that you get when you have those moments that then moves into all the other media. So I'd say for everyone, just keep looking for the thing where you're like, oh, this is like, I do enjoy this. This is my thing. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I get that lecture from you every time you and I talk together, at least 8 times a conversation.
Not 8, at least 1 good time.
I don't know. I'd say that's.
Right. Well, thank you for asking. Hey, Deb, you got a question?
Yeah, I remember you saying during your talk, like you just have to kind of trust in the drawing process and like kind of stick with it. Do you see any similarities between the drawing process and like the creating process with ceramics, and kind of just trusting what you're doing? Like, I guess with the 2 mediums, are there any similarities or differences?
Absolutely. I think in terms of all art making, you kind of got to work through the dark in some way. So I feel like in a lot of spaces, it's like you do have to kind of trust that the thing is going to work, you know? And so, and I guess maybe since I have the mic, to get more specific, right? So like I do the ceramic stuff, and I feel that like I know how to make things in ceramics. So at a certain point for me in my practice now is that it's not necessarily about can I make the object in clay, it's more like, is the object doing this next level thing that I need it to do? Does that make sense now? So at some point it becomes like it's not just about the material or that technique, it actually becomes about like the ideological component, the concept with it. And that's the thing that you're really seeing whether it works or not.
Justin, it was nice. I'm like Rye. I love the animation. I love seeing especially that first image was so impressive. Just the lettering and the texture, and when I saw the animation, it got me thinking about that in the way that was represented. You represented that drawing was time-based, and then I started thinking about ceramics also being time-based in a way that you're making this piece within a time period, and then also knowing that you do DJ work. I mean, is that a thread that you can see in your practice, this kind of relationship that you're interested in things that happen through the process, through the time?
Man, that's a really good one, Ron. I've never thought about it in terms of things being time-based in that way. I've definitely thought a lot about the relationship to ceramics in DJing, not just with like the potter's wheel and the turntables, but just thinking about like there's moments where things like need to transition from one to the other, and you have to kind of guide it to transition, right? So it's like you have to like keep your piece from cracking so you can get it into the kiln, and then you get it back and we've made that transition. And then we glaze it, right? And we have to do it in a way so that we get it back out, it's in good shape, and we sort of think about it in that way. I've never really thought about my drawing in a time-based kind of way. However, I did really enjoy doing those little title pages. I thought that was really quite fun. And I actually like it when, unlike those really long, slow scribble drawings, I actually like it when drawings are like quick and like fast, you know? And that was why when I asked a couple of students if they would draw portraits of me, I was like 3 minutes or less, no more. And the same with mine, where I was like, set a timer and just draw it as fast as I can. So
yeah, I thought it nicely, because I think sometimes people over focus on drawing as a noun instead of drawing as a verb, right? Mm-hmm. So I thought that the way that you presented that was really effective.
Yeah, and I think that there's something like I want people to think about drawing as a verb, and drawing is something that's less confining. in a way, maybe going back to some of Rajika's comment or question, or something where it's like, it doesn't feel confining or restricting, something where it's like, if you think outside of it, it can do all of these other things. So thanks, Ron. That was a really good one. Are there any other questions out in TV land? Oh, Keith.
I was hearing you talk about drawing, and it's sort of like you're using drawing to come to a sort of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And drawing is also a way to like visualize that knowledge. So, you know, it could be like very diagrammatic and informative. And I guess I'm curious about your take on your contribution to the Drawn Out conference. And I could share my screen real quick so I can just sort of show
go for it.
Our audience some of your contribution to the conference. Oh shoot, it's a little bit of a mess here. Wait a second. Okay. So here's a sort of blurred version of what you submitted, which were like, I don't even know how many drawings there were, but on this sort of like computer sheets of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so I'm kind of curious, like, because you talked about drawing mainly not being like the art sort of your main sort of like artwork stuff. It's not like really like your project. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of coming from the realm of drawing that is more like didactic, or mm-hmm. it's preliminary and preparatory. So as your contribution has been installed in different ways. So let me pull up another one. So there's that one. Here's another one. Oops, wait, let me go. I need to zoom out here. Oh, so here's another installation of your drawings. I can't remember where this was at. And then the most recent one, they're hanging kind of like in the hallway here. Mm-hmm. You know, in the ceiling. So like, how do you feel about how these drawings are being activated in a way that's sort of like, it seems to be going beyond what they were. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can elaborate on that.
You know, I feel like these particular drawings, okay, so that one that you can see on the top right with the dark little cylinders on it. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Keith. That was a drawing from, like, these are all, some of these are actually drawings that were like me doing little studies of like, what happens if I do this? And then some of them are actually like real life doodles, right? And so that one in the upper right, I don't know exactly what was going on there, but that was like a hard conversation on the phone that day. And I don't know what the topic was, but I do remember like, oh, when I was drawing those like little dark cylinders, oh, that was a tough day. And so I kind of see these works a lot of times like in these presentations. I love it however people kind of present them, but I sort of looked at this as sort of like taking a lot of those semi-conscious kinds of like doodles that you'll do, right? Like on the phone, dare I say in a meeting, and those kinds of things. And then taking those and basically like letting them be like all rearranged for what they are, so they can take on any different kind of composition, you know? So for me, that's what I thought was interesting about it, whereas like I had a way to go back and grab what were just fleeting thoughts and then present those as the drawings or the possibility of work. So,
which it kind of like points back to the notion of the time-based element and how it's like a record of this one moment where you sort of signifying like, oh, that was a bad conversation, that moment of time. And then it seems like a lot like the way they've been installed is, you know, like they tend to like sort of activating a space, or it seems like our colleagues in the conference have been using these drawings in a multitude of ways that just to activate the space, and that way kind of like activating the viewer. And especially in this last install, like we're sort of like walking through the hallway, and it becomes this like durational component to it. So I like that idea, like how Ron mentioned, like drawing as a verb is sort of performative.
Yeah.
Thanks for adding this.
Oh, thank you guys for these heavyweight questions. Things got serious.
Any other questions or comments for Justin?
Well, Denison friends, all of us here on campus, you can look for the drawn out conference installation. It's going to be in a semi-hidden location within Bryant, but you can expect to see it after the seniors critique on Friday. Right now, all the space needs to go to them. So,
Justin, thank you so much again for your contribution to the conference and for everybody here present and being part of this community. I couldn't have made it as vibrant without you. And just want to say that the Drawn Out Conference in its entirety is archived online, and it is available at drawnoutconference.com. You can catch us on Instagram, just search it up. All these talks will be archived as well. So please take a look, sift through it, and share with your friends and family and loved ones. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good job, Keith.
See ya.
Thanks,
Justin. Thank you all. Thanks for visiting. See ya. See ya.
Keith, good work, my man. Thank you.